We're ready.
All right, let's do it. So we're going live, and we are very live and alive and excited. We are here on Thursday, another Data on Kubernetes live stream. And I shouldn't say another Data on Kubernetes live stream. Interesting that this is live stream number 95, and the title has a number 99 in it with a little bit of a Jay-Z kind of reference. Very, very happy to be here with someone. We were talking before we got started with Lisa Marie Namphy. And if there's anybody who is a Data on Kubernetes community OG, it's definitely Lisa. Lisa goes back not just 6 months, not 10 months, but over a year with this community, which is almost older than this community is, which is incredible. So anyway, very nice to have Lisa from Cockroach TV with us, and also joined by Michelle, who's going to be kind of driving this talk for us. And this talk is very much influenced by a report that Michelle's been working on, or has completed, interviewing a bunch of different folks, DevOps and architects, about their kind of challenges and experiences running data-intensive workloads on Kubernetes. So very excited about that. And also happy to share this link here in the chat. The Data on Kubernetes community has also recently completed a report. It's interesting to see some of the findings that we might have in common. But anyway, we'll get into all that later. Of course, you also know that we've got our DOK Day coming up next week on Tuesday. I'm actually flying to California tomorrow, very, very early. But if you haven't signed up for that already, we've got about 3,000 people who have, so you can do that very easily. You've got the link right there. That's pretty much all I got to say about that. Lisa, very nice to have you with us again. Michelle, welcome. Lisa, could you just start out giving us a little bit of background about who you are, and then we can jump to Michelle?
Yeah, thank you, Bart. And I would also like to take a moment to welcome anybody that's joining us through the Cloud Native Containers user group, the one that John and I have been running for, oh my gosh, almost 10 years now. It wasn't always Cloud Native Containers. It was OpenStack. It was Kubernetes. It was a whole bunch of things. Many of you know me through the SF Bay cloud native community that I've been in for so many years. These days I'm at Cockroach Labs for my, day job as I'm doing open source stuff still in the evening, and I'm a CNCF ambassador. So I will also be getting my butt down to LA next week, and I hope I will see so many of you for the first time in person in at least 2 years. So I'm really excited about that. I had developer relations at Cockroach Labs, and I have the absolute pleasure of getting to work with Michelle, who is amazing, and who we are featuring in either of these user groups for the first time. So today is a very special day for us. So Michelle, would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I am a senior technical content writer for Cockroach. I'm also a front-end developer by training, and I do open source in my also abundant free time in the evenings, which is like this big, but still. And I'm super happy to be here today. As I put in my bio, front-ender, but Kubernetes curious.
Oh, very, very good. That's good. Well, you're in a very good place then. So Michelle, can you just give us a little bit of background? We saw this in the meetup description about how this kind of went about. What was the impetus? What really got this whole, need to study what you took a look at? What got all that started?
So we've reached a point with Kubernetes where we basically know how it works and how to work with it. So, everybody was like head down for a long time because it's pretty complex and the ecosystem had to develop quite a bit anyway. So, but now we can actually lift our heads up and look around and wonder, how are other people working with it? So if you go and look for how to work with Kubernetes, you can find tons of resources, obviously, but how is Kubernetes being used? There's very little out there. So we were wondering that at Cockroach. Our partners over at Red Hat were wondering the same thing. So we decided to do this very targeted survey. So we mainly talked to systems architects and some pretty high level, project managers. So less boots on the ground developers and engineers, as much as the people who are evolved at more of a strategic and planning level. And that's really cool with the DOK survey, because that's much more talking to everyday, sleeves rolled up people actually down in there working in it. But I would like to say too, that out of the 200 companies we talked to, which were primarily very large corporations, global, the Fortune Global 1000, out of all of the people we talked to, I had something I was going to say after that and I completely forgot.
That's all good. That's part of the magic of doing things live. That's what makes these things fun.
So I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. No. You can't? Now
No,
can you?
I can.
Yeah, you can? Okay.
Yeah.
So what was
Uh-oh.
it? We have different things going on here. Michelle, can you hear me now?
Uh-oh. I think
Oh,
I know Michelle's been having issues. We had these issues yesterday with Michelle's
that's okay. That's
volume as
okay.
well,
The
or
report's
microphone.
been fine until just up to this second.
But once
Okay,
again,
but
that's
you're
okay.
back.
It's the
I'm
magic.
back.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
Perfect.
Michelle, you were explaining that you talked to 200 primarily large corporations, most of which belong to the Fortune 1000. And in terms of the profile of the folks that you were talking to, like you said, some pretty high level folks. Contrasting, the DOK research report that came out, where there was a mixture of different profiles. 500 different people were interviewed, some CTOs, some CIOs, and some engineers. And then you were going to lead on to something after that.
So what I was saying is I think this is a really interesting approach that we had like two divergent, what would you call them, cohorts that we spoke with, sort of. I mean, there's definitely crossover, but for the most part. But I think just from the really quick glance I've been able to take at the DOK report, that what we found really backs up and kind of amplifies what the DOK report found. We're seeing a lot of the same things. I mean, the numbers might be a little different, but the trends are pretty consistent. So that's comforting. But I am much more able to talk about what we found because, like I said, I only had a couple seconds to really look at the
Came out today.
report. I know, like Lisa sent it 19 minutes before we were supposed to start.
But I had a sneak peek, and I can absolutely double down on that. It's good to know the communities are consistent, and one of the things that came up in both of the reports is that the fact that databases are really the number one workload that people are running on Kubernetes. And, I remember just even 2 years ago when I was at my last Cloud Data startup and, solving those day two problems, running stateful applications in Kubernetes was like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? Even from why, why would you do it? Can you do it? And how are we going to do it? And now it's amazing. People are like, yeah, absolutely. That is what's making us 2 times more productive. That's why we're going to Kubernetes. And it's so cool to see, having been in this Kubernetes community for so long, it's so cool to see it come to this point where you're actually getting this productivity in production running workloads.
Yeah, I think we only got stateful sets in 2018. So
yeah, looking at the evolution, that's a really good point. And that was kind of like like if you want to say a turning point or a milestone on this journey towards, first of all, is this conceptually even possible? Does it make sense? In what cases it makes sense? And then Lisa, what you mentioned, seeing the evolution, just going back 2 years, be like, what? Why are you going to do that? This sounds totally crazy. And little by little, and then, once again, if it weren't for the input and experiences of folks such as Lisa that have seen this firsthand and interacting directly with the practitioners that are working with this kind of stuff and the issues and difficulties and challenges that they're having, which then gives rise to the need for a community that's specifically focused on this. So it's really cool to see how these things have evolved. That being said, Michelle, I believe you have a presentation. If you'd like to share that, we can jump right in.
Sure. Okay. Let's see how this goes. Okay.
It's going to go well.
Now we're really going to test that bandwidth.
No, the thing is, I always say this, but as much as we talk about difficult technologies like data on Kubernetes, few things can be as challenging as Zoom.
I know, right? It's like hilarious. Yeah, I think all three of us, I don't know if anyone else, I got booted out like a minute ago and came back in. I'm not sure what happened there. So sorry if maybe it's my computer too. But this is all good. But what's going to be even harder part is trying to do a show in person next week for the first time in 2 years. That is, I can't even get my mind around it. That's going to be crazy.
It's a pretty significant change. I mean, like I said, yesterday we did this DOK Students Day, which was 6 hours long, but obviously it's just, cycling through speakers that are online, doing things in person. It's, it's a whole, and really the hybrid kind of stuff, I find that even more challenging.
Oh yeah. That's like doing 2 shows at the same time, but exactly. You're actually live for one of them. Yeah. You just need 2 teams. Anybody out there? Best practice.
Who's got an extra team that's got nothing to do and wants to jump in. I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
have to do that, which is good because there's still travel restrictions and there's still people who, can't go places. And so, that's how we're supporting this one as well. But we just did a Jamstack Conf yesterday, and it was, I don't know if you heard about the great power outage in San Francisco.
Mm-mm.
An entire city block went down, and of course, it was where they were broadcasting the conference from. So they had to like boomerang it out to their guy in England who's like sitting in this dark room and he's emceeing the conference from there. And we were live in the booth all day long because it was supposed to be designated hours, but since the whole schedule got messed up, I think I was on camera for 10 hours yesterday
Oh
in
wow.
the booth. I just never stopped. It was a crazy thing, but it was a great conference. That's a great community, by the way. Netlify did a fantastic job even working through the glitches, and Jamstack is a really fun community. And talk about a community that, needs to learn about the importance of databases and cloud native databases, and a community that historically hasn't really
Yeah.
wanted to worry about the database. They want to
Mm-hmm.
like be every like app intensive. You've got a lot of web developers, front end developers, and they want everything running locally if they can. And then now all of a sudden it's like, no, you still need to store some data somewhere. Like that has to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And we think we're a good fit for that.
Just in case everybody's wondering, definitely a good fit. Awesome. So, all right, Michelle, do you want to share that screen?
I will share my screen. I am
Sure.
this is the first time I've ever done this,
That's
so
okay.
forgive me if
First
it
time for
gets weird.
everything. That's okay.
Okay. And then
If it doesn't work, I think I have your deck as well.
Yeah, we can always
okay.
swap in or out. That's totally fine too.
Are you looking at my deck?
I can be. I
No,
was
what are you
recently.
guys seeing right now?
Oh no, we're just.
We
I
just
don't
see you.
see.
Hey, you look great. So that yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we should just go with that. I just look
Okay,
great.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, Lisa, if you want to share your screen, go for it.
I
No,
will. Okay, now.
Perfect.
Oh, it looks like
actually,
Michelle.
yeah.
Oh
Would
no,
you
no,
share your
Michelle.
screen and then I can talk through it so I don't have to worry about
That's
stumbling
totally
through
fine.
the
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
that you. So you are sharing now.
Yeah. So yeah, Michelle, there should be just a red button that says stop share. There you go. Good job. Awesome.
Okay. So now I have to figure out how to do this. So you go ahead and talk through your first talking point while I figure this out. Sorry,
Perfect.
everybody. You'd think we would have the Zoom thing down by now, but we don't. But let me share. I'm going to share this.
It's all good.
Well, we started out by talking about just why we did the survey. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
And then what I really wanted to do with this survey was definitely drill down as far as we could into workloads, because workloads really tell the story of how Kubernetes is being used day by day to just really get stuff done. Because, at the end of the day, Kubernetes is just a platform for getting applications built and deployed. So I guess it's no surprise that 94% of everybody we talk to is using Kubernetes in production. And what we did then was ask them exactly like, what's your permutation there? So we are able to see that they are running either, like there's this really weird split. So 80% of the people who are running Kubernetes are running like either a big number, 15 or more workloads, or a small number, like 1 to 5 workloads. So there was just this big split. Everybody else is running like somewhere in between, but that was just a scattered handful. Basically, it's either or. So big, go big or stay small. So it was really interesting to see what that was, because it was really consistent when we get into some of our other results. We saw a similar split that's related to this, and we were trying to figure out what that would mean. So the hypotheses we kind of came up with was that it's like an adoption journey, I guess. Companies are likely to start off with a small number of applications or services on Kubernetes when they're just getting started, because they need to establish that comfort level working with any kind of complexities, especially if they're fairly new to distributed applications in general. But once they're successful, adding more workloads is pretty easy, so they're able to grow pretty quickly. But then it also, like, why would they skip mostly from very small to very large? I think that would be what happens is people are like, hey, let's put everything on. This is cool. So like all of a sudden they're running a bunch. But at a certain point, once you really get pretty, good at day-to-day operations, you're like, wow, maybe this is too much. And so maybe what we see is like an emerging economy of scale. So as they gain familiarity and efficiency, they realize they can consolidate things and kind of like go back down again. So we didn't actually expect this. Of course, this is the first time we ever did this survey. So next time we do it, we want to frame the questions in a way so that we can understand if, how long you've been doing this and like at what point have you changed numbers if you've changed numbers, because I would really like to confirm that this is kind of an adoption journey. Like you start small, you go big, and then eventually maybe you come back around to small again. So I would definitely be interested in hearing from anybody who's watching today that might have done this and have some thoughts about it. Okay, next one.
Yeah, and Bart, I can't see the question, so you'll have to if
Oh,
there's
no,
any
yeah,
that
don't worry, definitely will.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to forward the slides. Did that work?
Yep, good job. So after we talked about how many workloads are you running, we asked like, how are you running them? Like what kind of teams have you got? So the big result here was if 94% are running Kubernetes in production, 95% of those running Kubernetes in production are doing it in-house. Like only 5% are using managed services, which kind of surprised me at first. But when I stepped back and thought we were talking to some very large companies, they're the ones that have got the deep tech bench and can actually pretty much be hands-on with it. But this is the other split I was talking about. So it's the type of teams that are doing this. It's pretty much evenly split between a dedicated DevOps or SRE team running everything, or that they've spread the responsibility out among a bunch of different teams. So if we go to the next slide, there we go. So you can see that 43% of the people are doing cross-functional teams, and then everybody else, there were actually 6 people we talked to who had a dedicated team of 1 person. I bet that 1 person is very busy all the time. I thought that was funny. I don't know why. And then of the people who have dedicated teams, most of the teams are actually about 2 to 10 people. And then slightly fewer than that is 10 or more. And again, that really breaks down to company size. That pretty much correlated to the bigger the company, the bigger the team, which totally makes sense. What didn't correlate, though, interestingly, was cross-functional versus dedicated. That didn't really seem to have any relationship to anything. I think each company is doing what's best for them.
I think this would also be a good time to talk about, when I see that a dedicated team of 1, I'm thinking like, woman or man in a garage with a dog. The 1 is probably the dog, right? So, are we interviewing mom and pop shops here? Did we mostly talk to startups, or did we talk to large enterprises? I think this will be a good time to talk about who we surveyed.
Yeah, these were all very large companies. I mean, we talked to companies like Verizon, we talked to major banks and financial institutions. I think we talked to like Citibank, Credit Suisse. We talked to Sony. My personal favorite was Harley Davidson, the motorcycle manufacturer. I mean, nice. Yeah, right. Very cool. So there are a couple of cool things in there, but
I think as another thing, because this is a question that we frequently ask, and obviously it's a question that both of you would understand very well, is that we're often asked, this is live stream number 95. We've asked this question many times. Is Kubernetes ready for data? If so, why? If not, why not? And if why not, what are the issues? Is it a talent issue? Is it a technical issue? Is it a financial issue? And seeing this thing of like you said, a dedicated team of 1, particularly in very large organizations that have plenty of cash, it invites lots of other questions. Why is that the case? Is it the scarcity of talent that is just very difficult to find people who are qualified to do this? They need 15, 20 years experience working with databases. Anyway, it opens up so many other conversations. And that's what's so exciting about being in all this, very nascent sort of space that's growing as more people get in on it and start to understand exactly what's going on. And based on that, what we can expect in the future. So anyway, I love it.
And that's one of the places where the DOK community report really dove in deep, and that's what we found out when we were going through that data, right? That it is a talent issue, right? That's, I mean, and this happens. We've seen this happen with so many open source projects that have, everybody dove into creating the project, and then it took a while to catch up with, like, oh wait, we got to think about the training and the operators, and we got to remember the architects, and who's out there actually using this stuff. We had so much fun building it, but let's train the people that are actually going to be using it. And so we do see, the technology was adopted, but the talent to the scale that the technology was adopted is lagging behind a little bit. So if everybody's listening, go out there and get your CKA certificates. Go take those classes.
And also watch the webinar that we did with Keith not that long ago, where they were specifically talking about getting does it make sense to get a CKA or a CKD? And there are different advantages. A lot of it is that, it does help you get more jobs. It also organizes the learning for you so that you have, a very clear objective that you're working towards. So there is really a lot of practical value in doing those certifications.
Yeah. And I don't know if we're going to get into it here. I don't want to get ahead of your slides, Michelle, but another of the things of the findings was just the complexity of it. How do you simplify? More automation, more standardization came up a lot, and operators came up a lot. Michelle, are you going to go into that in a little bit?
No, we're going to stick with the high level trends, the adoption trends themselves. Mostly we will get to one aspect of that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll cover it more at the end.
I'm sure because operators are that definitely featured in our report. It's something that also comes up in a lot of live streams. Anyway, Michelle, continue.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So this is where we took the two things we saw, the two different splits, and combined them just to see how that would play out. Like, what would that tell us? So we got the nearly 50-50 split between small versus triple the size workloads, like less than 5 or more than 15. And then there's the same 50-50 split with the type of teams operating the workloads, either dedicated SRE or SRE DevOps or the cross-functional. So if you look at the chart, and I don't want to get too bogged down in this, and we've got the link at the end, and we'll drop it in the chat too, so that you can go and like geek out on the numbers yourself if you're finding this particularly fascinating. But what we found out is that the distribution of responsibilities, whether it's dedicated DevOps SRE team or cross-functional teams, is the same. It doesn't matter if they're running just a handful or a bunch. And that was the thing I was talking about. We'd like to drill down into better next time. We just didn't construct the survey in a way that gives us insight into this, because we certainly weren't expecting it. So, I mean, for those running their own in-house teams, which is 54%, the number of workloads we could tell directly correlates to the size of their team. And, it makes sense, like smaller loads equals a smaller dedicated team, larger loads equals a larger dedicated team. But it's telling that the majority are cross-functional teams. And that makes sense when you think about it, because like anybody actually working in a cloud native way using Kubernetes for everything, not just data, is already comfortable with build run teams that can handle responsibilities, each one for their service. So they don't need the dedicated if they don't want to have that. I mean, I imagine the biggest companies probably have both because they can have anything they want, but does anybody have any questions about this?
No, like you said, once again, the cost factor, it is one factor, but is it really the only one, particularly considering as organizations that can snap their fingers and pretty much make anything happen? I think
you have to say that with our results, I didn't actually make a slide for this, but cost was a very low consideration. We asked, about concerns and goals and reasons for adoption and stuff like that. And cost was on there, but it finished last place. But again, we're talking to really big companies.
But I know, but but it's still very interesting that it seems like that might be one of the primary, initial, and that's what's always cool too, in the same way with us for doing this report. You have your assumptions, your beliefs, your prejudices you might have going into it. And then the data actually kind of wakes you up to the fact that actually maybe it's not actually the case. So I definitely think that it's interesting that cost isn't as much of a factor as a lot of people assume it is. And same, because this happens a lot too, because we've had talks as well too about cost control or cost optimization. And for some organizations, yes, that AWS bill hurts a lot, or whether it's AWS or any other cloud provider, but it's one amongst various other factors that also need to be included, and that the conversation isn't just blinded or overwhelmed by the cost factor. So anyway, like that a lot.
Yeah.
So if we go to the next slide.
I just tried to. Nothing happened. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So I think this is something that starts to get a little more detailed and interesting, which is the actual type of database that people are deploying. So we're kind of getting ahead of our big takeaway here, which is when we went to do this survey, we were partnering with Red Hat, and we meant it to be a very general survey. I mean, obviously we're a database company, so that's what we're really interested in, but we made it like just as agnostic as we could. And the data results we actually got were very compelling. So, but I don't want to spoil it. So that's the big takeaway. So let's just look at this one. So this is specifically looking at databases on Kubernetes. So the majority of organizations, 58%, are running their data workloads on Kubernetes, but the rest, 44%, just manage their database externally still. And we didn't ask about like intent to migrate. So that would be something we could do next year. But there was a pretty big spread on how they actually do it. So, a single instance of a database within a single pod. I mean, are you even really Kubernetesing, dude? And then
I love it. Kubernetesing.
Yeah, I think that's the first, and I hope certainly not the last time I'm going to hear that.
That was a first for me too. I love it.
Oh, God.
You got to put that on Twitter.
Kubernetes as a verb.
Exactly. I was so impressed. Yeah, are you truly Kubernetesing?
Dude, you have to add the dude. Or actually, bruh.
Bruh, you Kubernetesing for real, bruh? Yeah.
Bruh,
Oh
do you
my
in
gosh.
Kubernetes?
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, all right. Next slide, I'm guessing.
No, but I think that's a really strong point as well, too, is because there's so much pressure to kind of succumb to this Kubernetes, wave of attention and boom that's going on right now, that while it's natural that some people fall into that, as you said, what does it really mean to do this? Is it like, oh, we've downloaded, or, we're cloud native, we've been in the cloud since the cloud existed, all these kinds of, technological trends that come along. There is that kind of pressure. But I think that would definitely be a strong title for the next one. Are you Kubernetesing, bro?
Well, it does look like most people have it pretty well sorted, because, a good half of people are actually running a distributed database across multiple pods and clusters. So they are actually distributing it. So thank you. All right. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Next slide.
Did we talk about this one?
Yep.
Okay.
And I just want to shout out how awesome our report looks. I think it's just super cool. The data visualizations are really beautiful and fun. I don't know if this is the kind of thing people are all that interested in or not. So we were just showing, wow, I got my slides out of order. Can you go 2 more down? I'm sorry to do this to you, Lisa. Oop. Keep going, back up.
Sorry, there's a delay. I click and then.
Oh, we want the one with the triangles.
This one?
Okay, that one. So, well, we asked what kind of data are you guys actually working with? So 46% of our respondents are running their data workloads on Kubernetes, and of those, 59% are running both transactional and analytic workloads, 28% running transaction only, and 13% running analytic only. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting just right there. I mean, I would think most organizations running analytic probably wouldn't look at Kubernetes, like analytic only wouldn't look at Kubernetes as a solution, because, I mean, I'm definitely interested in your input on this, but I mean, Kubernetes is not exactly your best tool for heavy data analysis. So maybe they're not doing heavy duty data work, house type loads. They're just maybe running more like light analytics. So that was unexpected.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too, Bart. Do you talk to like OLAP companies? Have you talked to the folks from Snowflake? I mean, or the old Hyperion stuff? Are they running in Kubernetes?
That's a good question. In terms of folks that we've had in our community that have touched on this analytics aspect, particularly it's been through, I would say, coincidentally, three Apache technologies:
Hmm.
Kafka, Spark, and then also Druid. Well, actually four. We had Pulsar, and so yeah. So through that, and actually it was just a couple weeks ago. We had someone from Real Data that was on and was talking very much about Apache Druid, and then of course there's the kind of debate, which one do I need to be going through? And so I would say that, because when we look at the report kind of helps us with this too, and actually when Lisa and I met over the summer with Sam Ramji from DataStax, we were talking about, okay, data on Kubernetes, because it gets confusing. That's also why the report helps. What is it that we're talking about when we talk about that? Like in the classic sense, where once again, we're not talking about, 200 years of history here, but storage and databases, seem to be like the kind of at the core, like this is where it's kind of first starting, where it's happening the most. But then we start branching out into other areas, and analytics is definitely one of those areas. And with one of the companies that's also in our ecosystem, Airbyte, like they're also very active in that area, and I believe they've also connected with Cockroach on a couple of, I think on a couple of different things. But I would say that it's not at the forefront necessarily, but it is something that's definitely in the ecosystem. And we were talking about data warehouse. Yeah, we had a live stream about ClickHouse not that long ago with Robert Hodges. So getting that angle there too as well. So like I said, these are things that as the adoption of running data on Kubernetes becomes more normalized, or once this report gets extensively shared, as well as our report, that people realize this is not this like secret Illuminati cult that's running data on Kubernetes, that there's actually, a lot of other people that are doing it, and in lots of different ways, be it machine learning, be it analytics, be it, AI, and which also runs together quite well with machine learning. So seeing that there are different areas in the, if we want to say, data on Kubernetes ecosystem that are growing at their own pace. So I would definitely say that analytics is a part of that. And we'll actually be having a live stream, I think, in November, talking about Lake FS. So that, and it's the second time we're going to be talking about that. Snowflake per se, if anybody from Snowflake is out there, you're more than welcome to come on a live stream whenever you want, because we would definitely like to talk to them, because obviously they're very well known for what they're doing.
Yeah, I'd be really curious. I'll come co-host that one with you. I'd be really
Do
curious to
it,
talk to
do
them as
it.
well.
Yeah, do it.
Cool, cool. All right. I think this. Oh my gosh.
That's okay.
Okay,
It's part of the magic.
I'm
Ha!
stretching the ability of my little laptop here, or maybe it's that. Oh my gosh, sorry. It
Oh,
goes
we got
all
it.
the way to
We
nothing.
got a question. We got a question. And this is probably asking about the slides that are still yet to come. Is cluster size and storage solutions part of this survey as well?
Yes, it is. I'm not sure we'll get to it since we're kind of a little bit crippled here. So,
Oh, no. We'll get to it. I'm not worried. We'll get to it.
well, we're crippled in that I didn't make slides for it.
Oh, but yeah, but we can just touch on it later. That's okay.
I got to leave something for people to go actually. There's a lot more to that than what we're actually looking at today.
Okay, that's fine.
But I wanted to get to the big reveal. So I think click down once, Lisa, and you'll be on the right slide.
It's this
Really?
that one.
That's so weird. You're
And
like,
then I think it skips. I'm so sorry, everybody. Is this
It's okay.
the
that goes to the end. All right, let's just talk about that then. So this is our big takeaway. So the number one concern, we asked all our users, like, what are your biggest challenges, your biggest concerns around, architecting and deploying for Kubernetes in production? And half of everybody who answered, like 46% of these 200 very large companies answered modernizing and architecting for data workloads. That was the most mentioned concern, the number one most popular concern. And also 10% of people said that was their only concern. So they were able to rank their concerns. So, like finding experts and training teams. So definitely like the personnel aspect and recruiting, cost, and then migrating legacy workloads, legacy stacks over. So all of that was in the mix, but people really honed in on data. And what was really, really interesting is of the people who named architecting for data. None of them named migrating complex legacy workloads. So what that says to us, this was our big surprise takeaway for us as a data company in a non-data survey, was that this would emerge as being so primary for all of these companies. But what that says, if you like step back and consider all of these things together, is that of everybody we talk to, a full 25% or 1 out of 4 companies have already gotten comfortable in the application layer. You know, they're running in production and they're fine. And what they've done is they've identified their transactional database as their bottleneck. So this is what they're looking at. This is what they're working on. This is their big focus now. So that kind of goes back to our whole point of having the survey, which is like we figured out how to work with Kubernetes, but like what to do with it is still, how to best use it is still emerging. And that's a question I have for you, Bart, actually. And Lisa, you probably have some thoughts on this. Is, you know, early on, Kubernetes had this rap is that, you know, you can never run stateful workloads. Like, didn't Kelsey Hightower famously say, yeah. So do you think that, I mean, definitely not in this community, obviously, but outside of this community, is there still that lingering just assumption that Kubernetes is not good for data? Like, just don't even think about it. Don't even try it.
I'll let Lisa take that first. Go for it, Lisa.
Yeah, I think we've worked really hard to get rid of that notion, and I would like to say that it's gone. For 4 KubeCons in a row, I ran a co-located event called Cloud Native Storage Day, and we got together with anywhere between 8 and 12 of the companies that were really pushing the envelope in, you know, solving those day 2 problems, running stateful applications on Kubernetes containers. I mean, started with Mesosphere, right? And so we had so many companies who were passionate about this getting together, including big companies like Red Hat and Pure Storage, which has now purchased Portworx, the company I was with at the time. And the evolution of those 4 different KubeCons, so it was a 2-year period, you know, going from really the education and awareness and defining that category, you know, because it wasn't a Gartner quadrant. I mean, that category didn't exist. A lot of cloud native categories didn't exist. So how do we actually validate that this is a real category? But by the 4th one, the customers were on stage talking about their use cases and talking about what they built, you know, across the whole ecosystem. It wasn't just the storage piece, like Bart mentioned, storage and I would say databases and, you know, security and networking. These are all problems that Kubernetes needed the community to help solve, and really needed the customers to push them to solve, because it wasn't like, you can't just say, oh, don't do that. Don't run stateful sets, don't run stateful applications in containers. I mean, it was like, no, we are going to do this. Help us figure out how. And I love that these open source communities, because people get together, and companies who would normally compete get together and figure this out together. And we all help each other, and the whole rising tides lifts all boats. And I see that very much happening with data as well. So I'd like to say that's a thing of the past. But the question now is, how are we going to do it? What's the best way to do it? Who are the partners to help? What are the tools out there? What are the operators out there that are going to help us do this so that we can, you know, get to that finish line faster?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Lisa just mentioned. I would say that, you know, to your question, you know, do you interact with engineers? And that's actually happened even in our community. Like, when we explain to people, like, hey, would you be interested in doing a live stream about data on Kubernetes? And they say, oh yeah, sure. And you're like, but you know that we're talking about running stateful workloads. They're like, no, everything's stateless. Like, that's, why would you do that? And people that work in great companies, you know, end users, like really, really experienced folks. But it's because, you know, when you've been learning something, and everything up until then or until now, it tells you this is the only way it's done, don't even think about doing it that way. It's only natural that people are going to have the reaction. However, going along with what Lisa said, is when you have, and that's once again the reason why our community exists, we have different folks from the ecosystem who, although they're in different companies, all agree this is really the way to do this, and it's going to be the way to do this in the future. So it's better that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And then the other thing, just to specifically touch on the Kelsey Hightower thing, I just shared his tweet that came out in June. I put that in the YouTube chat, where he said, you know, publicly, like, I never really imagined that I was going to be saying this, but we finally, crossed the chasm. That specifically referring to the operator that Google had created for Oracle databases in order to be able to run on Kubernetes, which is called el carro. It means the cart in Spanish. And so obviously I think that's somewhat of a turning point. And for us, it was kind of like a breath of fresh air, because it always seemed like up until that point, everything was, well, Kelsey Hightower says no. And so the thing is, he's worked very hard and he has very good reasons. He's done his homework and written books and been very active. And so because of that, actually, in the DOK Day next week, we have a panel with someone from Oracle, with Rick Vasquez, one of our community members, and then also someone from PlanetScale, that are addressing this specific topic. And also, once again, not only is that, is Kubernetes ready for data, but operators, is that the only, or should that be the primary answer to this challenge? Or will there be other kind of deeper integrations that will be going on so that it's not just going to be so operator focused? Going back to your point earlier, Michelle, about the sort of army of one, building an operator takes time and resources. And so for a company, that is a cost. And not just in terms of money, but in terms of time. The time they're spending on that, they can't spend on other things. So you have to really evaluate, like, does it make sense for us to build our own operator, or should we be thinking about other kinds of solutions? So anyway, the debate is still kind of there, but I feel a lot of comfort knowing that folks like yourselves at Cockroach Labs, as well as the other companies that are participating in the Data on Kubernetes community, that together we share this goal in common. I think it's becoming less of a sort of lonely opinion to have, knowing that you're being well protected and well informed also by these organizations that are dealing with this stuff in their day to day.
Yeah, and Bart, if I can add to that, it was probably at least 2 years ago that I was on stage with one of my favorite. He was a customer at the time, NIO, the autonomous car company. Michael Richmond was their chief architect at the time, and I was interviewing him about. He was one of the pioneers here to build something and run it, and then it was on Mesosphere, and then moving it over to Kubernetes. And I was having him tell his story and how he was doing that for this incredible. I mean, can you imagine how much data an autonomous car, a self-driving car would have, right? I mean, so much data, right? So he said, Lisa, the only truly stateless application that exists is Hello World. Every application has some bit of state, right? So if you think about what we're really talking about, we have been running, I mean, there's been state in containers for a long time, right? There's an application. So that just kind of, was an aha moment for me. And I've quoted that quote, and I always give Michael credit for it because it just blew my mind. But it's really true. So don't be afraid. Run your stateful applications in containers. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Absolutely. Very, very good. Michelle, continue.
That's it. That's all I got.
Oh, okay. There's no backwards or forwards, and we go up or down, and then we find a mystery slide that was hidden. No, that's cool. That's cool.
I think the next one is a thank you slide that, I don't know, Michelle, if you drew these things, but they're so adorable.
That's lovely. That's lovely. So there you have the link, folks, if you want to check out the report in more detail, because we obviously got a sample of this, but what other kind of stuff, so we can, have a little bit of a teaser, what other kind of stuff will folks find in the report?
Well, we did a lot more cross comparison. We looked at deployment options and what kind of workloads are people running on what. Like, spoiler alert, Amazon still owns the world. But we kind of did Google a disservice, and I want to say that out loud here. I think we called it out in the report, but just to make sure. First, I just didn't have my thinking hat on when I wrote that question, and I conflated GKE and Anthos and should have split those out. So I think people only answered yes if they were specifically using Anthos, which is, obviously going to be not the majority. So I think GKE came in at a lower number than they would have otherwise. So definitely we'll be doing that next year, and we'll be doing it better. So that's one thing. We asked a bunch of other stuff too. We had some pretty interesting answers around multi-cloud and hybrid adoption, and we had some really, really interesting stuff around serverless. So 88% of people are saying, yep, we are going serverless, and they will be by the end of the year. But, the way we framed that question was, when we did the survey a few months ago, in 3 months and 6 months, will you have, already adopted serverless compute. And so 39% of people already doing it. Most of the others said, yes, we will in the next 3 months or 6 months. And, we're on our way. We're actively doing this. So only about 8% said we don't have a serverless strategy at this point. And then 2% said, what's serverless? So still have our work cut out for us there. So like I said, this wasn't a data only survey the way that the DOK survey is. So
that's true. No, obviously, yeah, looking at different areas, different trends that are ongoing. With that in mind as well, based on the answers that you got, and because doing a report, it's a lot of work. Seeing just the amount of work that went behind the report that we put out today. Based on the answers that you got, what kind of questions would you like to ask in the future? What are things you're like, oh, now I want to know more about this? Or what do you think would be the next things? Because then that's also the really cool thing about doing a report is you're like, well, next year we'll be able to compare this data side by side, see the kind of trends, see the kind of changes. What kind of questions, and Lisa, I'd like you to chime in on this as well too. What are the kind of questions would you like to have out there that maybe aren't being answered or aren't being addressed right now?
Crystal ball.
Yeah. Michelle,
go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm dying to hear what Lisa says.
Oh, I know I was actually gonna just bring up a couple of things also that we found out through. It's so amazing that we did these two reports kind of side by side, and there was different questions. And the DOK report went into areas about Michelle touched on it, like how are you running multi-cloud? Are you running on-prem? Are you running public, private? I was really interested that the split was very even across public cloud, private cloud, and running on-prem, and like 33% across, which was really interesting. And multi-cloud was, a topic that we've talked about for a few years, and we are starting to see it become a reality as Kubernetes gets more adopted. I think you'll see the reality of multi-cloud finally becoming a reality. But I just found that really interesting. I'm not surprised that there was so much on-prem. I guess I was surprised that there was so much public cloud, I have to say. That was I think really just from a cost standpoint. So of all things, but I guess from a management standpoint, I think that's what's driving people there. So we'll see as those workloads scale, and as if those costs can stay in check, if people stay running in public cloud. That was kind of one of my thoughts. So I'd love to continue asking more of those type of questions and see the evolution of that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because it's something that I've asked a few times, and I'm sure there's more concrete information out there about the true adoption of multi-cloud. It's something that I've been hearing about since, I want to say 2016, 2017, when the company that I was working at rushed into Azure, and then all of a sudden was like, hey, but maybe we can start doing stuff in AWS and other places as well too. And I'm still, because big thing we talk about in CNCF as well as DOK, avoiding vendor lock-in. So of course it's where multi-cloud, really jumps in. But I would like to, but I think it's more as on a personal level. I just need to kind of research that a little bit more to be better informed about it, because as much as it's something that we hear about, I would like to know exactly who's doing it, what's working for them, what their recommendations are, what are the, who are the early adopters in this, what recommendations do they have for folks that want to do the same thing, things of that nature. But yeah, I definitely dig the multi-cloud thing. Other questions though, like, going back to this thing about operators, was there anything that came up along the way? And Lisa as well, I'd like to, like your, sort of Cockroach Labs vision on this, that operators are kind of the go-to solution right now, but can we expect other kinds of solutions? And if so, what kind of solutions might they be? Any kind of comments on that?
Go ahead. I wasn't sure if you're asking me or Michelle, but go ahead, Michelle.
I don't have in-depth enough knowledge to have like super meaningful opinions here, but it would just seem to me that, you're looking at some different architecture when you're looking at a database, and some of them are traditional that kind of have Kubernetes functionality bolted on top, and some are architected from the beginning to just be distributed. And I would think that for a truly cloud native architecture data layer, to go with the same architecture in your application layer you're going to have to worry less about operators to begin with. And then that would be the place where the solutions really begin to emerge to just kind of get rid of those entirely.
Yeah, and just like everyone else, we wrote an operator for Kubernetes. Actually, that happened over a year ago. So, but I thought this survey was really interesting that a lot of the people were, the DOK survey, a lot of the folks said they needed an operator, but the operators didn't exist or weren't good enough and they were building their own. And then that's where we get back to the resource and the talent pool issues, because that, like you said, is not necessarily an easy thing to do, but it was worth it, is what we found from that data research.
So are they scratch building operators, or are they using Kube Builder? I haven't had a chance to read the survey yet in that level.
I don't think we drilled down and asked how they're building it. I think the question was more broad than that, and just it was kind of around the need for running. That's mine. I mean, Bart, you may have more information.
About that. Generally that's also been echoed because we've had more than a couple of live streams about operators. We also have a talk about operators in the DOK day next week, and that will also be addressed in the panel, like I said, with the Oracle folks. So, like I said, this has been sort of the common trend there, and there have been different approaches, but one thing is how it's being done, why it's being done, and also asking, given the amount of resources that have to go into the creation of the construction of an operator, from a sustainability perspective, if folks leave, do we have legacy issues? How are these things going to be updated over time? This is something that's come up in a fair amount of conversations as well with the folks at Percona, because they've worked a fair amount on operators as well. And then there's also been talk of, could there be an operator to rule operators? That came up with a company called Tessera that's also in our ecosystem. They're based in Spain and Valencia. Could there be one operator to rule them all? But because each operator is generally so designed, tailored, to a specific company or a specific open source project, then really having one that could possibly interact with all of them seems rather evasive, certainly at the moment. So like I said, it's definitely, I think, going to be an ongoing part of the conversation. Obviously, we don't want that to be such a dominant, agent in the DOK ecosystem that we, once again, as we were talking earlier, analytics is also very exciting. There are other things that are going on too. It does seem to be a kind of a common denominator. Like, what about a talk about operators? Like, well, we've had more than a couple, but there's always room for more. But like you said, Lisa explaining, Cockroach Labs going through the process of building that a year ago. How was that? What were the learnings? And what does that tell you about the rate at which Kubernetes is evolving, which I think we can all agree is quite fast? Will this be something that's will we be talking about operators in 5 years? We'll be talking about something else. It's one of the things that we understand that this is still a niche, that's growing, but as more folks start to really get their data on Kubernetes, when they read this report, they get inspired to do it even more so. Both reports, but starting with the Cockroach one, because that's what we're focused on right now. And I already shared the link in the YouTube chat if anybody wants to take a look at that. Also going to put that in the description, so it's super accessible, easy to take a look at. But like I said, I think that it's just good to see the amount of attention and conversations that are going on this. Because, for example, in the case of Cockroach Labs, Michelle, how many people worked on this report?
There were 3 of us. I was the main lead and author. I had technical advisor, and then I had the person who coordinated the administrative side of it. Thank you for not making me do that.
And we have to give a shout out to the graphics team. They did make it beautiful. So we'll say that a few more, but yeah. Another question too, that we don't really want to talk about it because we don't want to shout out any one particular vendor or throw anyone under the rug. But I am really curious about, roll your own versus distro and which distro, and our operators on the Red Hat OpenShift marketplace. And, but what about Rancher? What about who's going to really, because there's some companies doing some really, really cool stuff out there. And then, of course, I'm out here in the Bay Area where everybody has to run. I love how they call it vanilla Kubernetes. Every time someone says that, I think, yum, I love vanilla. That sounds tasty. But people like to roll their own out here. So that's, we see that happening too. And that kind of makes it a little bit more complicated because, not every distro is right, with trunk, right? So you've got this lag of features. That's okay if you're a big company and you want one throat to choke and you want the support that you're going to get from going with a distribution, or you don't have the expertise in house. But it's a fascinating question to me, to see where that's going to go. And I'm just glad I'm not involved in the distro wars, we'll call them.
Yeah,
Wow,
because
yeah.
that's kind of a big thing. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's a conversation that I would say every week there are a couple of comments in our Slack where that's coming up. And like you said, Lisa, that's definitely becoming a kind of a contentious battleground. Yeah.
And then you got to talk about standardization, and then you get into a whole like open source argument, and yeah.
Yeah. We did have one comment. I opened the report right here. And so I think they were asking about, where they can find specifically in the report, the part about storage. And so I'm looking in here. I do see that the part about databases is on page.
Oh, we didn't drill down into storage. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. In our report, that's definitely touched on. So yeah,
Yeah.
but if you want to take a look at that, like I said, the cockroach report on page 26 is where you get that wonderful graphic with all the stuff about Kubernetes and databases. But then as well too, I already put the link for the DOK report if anybody wants to take a look at that. And that'll be in there as well to get more information. And of course, obviously in both of our communities, you can jump into the DOK Slack, you can jump into the cockroach Slack, and you'll find people that are readily available to take these questions a little bit further if people want more depth.
Yeah, absolutely. Bart, if you want to put our Slack link in your thing, I'll send it to you.
Happy to do so.
That is, yeah, we've got a great community, always ready to answer questions. And I love how these two reports are so complementary. It was very validating for me to look at the DOK report. And like I said, for ours, we focused a lot on the data, but then the database stuff aspect, but then it was, an agnostic report, and we did ask a lot of questions that went beyond that. And then seeing the DOK report come out, I think the DOK report maybe reached out to different, like I think they said they reached out to C-suite and VA. They reached out to a different group of
Demographic,
users.
yeah.
To take their report. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
So yeah, they're both worth reading. They're both really great validations that running data intensive workloads on Kubernetes is definitely a thing.
Yeah. No, and I think also as well is that, it's funny that we're talking about data so much, but then it's really nice when you actually have your own data that you can show people saying like you said, is that this really is happening. We're not just, crazy prophets wandering around the desert shouting, like this is actually happening. As much as it's fun to be energetic and passionate about things, say no, like this is a real thing that's going on. And there's a wide cross section of different companies, both in your report as well as ours. So that it's not just focusing on one specific industry. We didn't just talk to, to telecommunications companies that are doing stuff with IoT and edge. There's a whole cross section of different end users that are there. And that's something as well too, really bringing that into account is that one thing is, a vendor perspective, but when you actually go out to the end user and say like, well, this is what we do with our data, and I'm going to show you how. And in some cases, well, and in different ones, and Lisa, you're well familiar with this too in the CNCF because of, the end user lounge. I've seen sometimes, that the end users are sometimes well ahead in certain areas compared to vendors, and until vendors get the ability to really interact with them and understand their problems, sometimes it's hard to kind of pin down exactly where the pain points are and where a vendor can then come in and really provide the help that an end user needs. So yeah, anyway, very, very good stuff. Big fan of reports.
Yeah, the problems are created before the solutions. Yeah.
It's a very, very good point. Cool. Well, we're just about to finish up. So anyway, Michelle.
I have one very important question.
Good. And I have one very important point to make after your question. So you go right ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, go ahead.
So Lisa, your comment about vanilla Kubernetes would indicate the existence of Kubernetes flavors. So is there seasonality to that? Are we in like the pumpkin spice Kubernetes? I'm down with that. I really am.
Okay, this is gonna be like wine.
I was just gonna say pairings. This is gonna be like
we're gonna do Kubernetes distro tasting notes. I love it. publish that one next time. I'm gonna take everybody's logo. What is Rancher's the bull? I guess you've got the Suisse lizard. We're gonna go and we're gonna figure out tasting notes for all these distros.
No, but I
Cool.
think, there's actually a lot that you can do with that. There is a cloud native cookbook that's a really, really cool project. And it's actually funny that we're getting to this part of the program where we're going to show a little bit of art, because I think that the more that we can relate these seemingly intangible kinds of concepts with things that have smells and flavors and things that we interact with in daily life, I think it, particularly for new folks, as well as for existing ones, it makes it much more fun and easier to interact with when, it's like, hey, we're going to talk about, nice white wine and good cheese and things like, but we're also going to mix Kubernetes in there, pumpkin spice, because we're getting close to we're in fall and Halloween and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm definitely a big fan of that. That being said, I'm going to share my screen because, as Lisa pointed out in the very beginning, we had our graphic recorder working furiously in the background. So you can probably see my screen now. So he created this while you were talking, and I think he did a pretty good job, as usual. So this is a nice little visual summary of some of the, obviously you can't touch on all of the points that were mentioned there, but a nice little way, like I said, to have a clear way of seeing, like, this is an entry point into this topic. Now go download the report and get all the juicy details. So anyway, thank you very much, Angel. I know he's listening, and he's probably lurking in our YouTube chat. But
I love this so much.
Beautiful job as always.
So much.
Michelle, the point that I wanted to make after your question is that this was your first talk, and it certainly shouldn't be your last, because you did a very, very good job.
Well, thank you. You made it very easy and fun, and I appreciate that. So,
and you made it fun for me to be here, so I thank you for that too. Yeah. Anyway,
awesome.
Very,
well,
very
I am heartbroken I won't get to go to this KubeCon, because I've never been to one and I've always wanted to go. And I was hoping this would be it, but maybe Europe, maybe in the spring.
Exactly. Let's solve the COVID situation, and then we'll all go everywhere.
Yeah. So yeah, 2022, May 17th to May 20th. It will be in Valencia in Spain. So I will have a short flight to go there. I'm very excited about that. Tomorrow I will be traveling 14 hours to get to San Francisco and then going to LA on Sunday. But I will get to see you, Lisa, and I'm sure other wonderful people from Cockroach, as well as other friends in the Data on Kubernetes community. So anyway, very much looking forward to that. Michelle and Lisa, a pleasure. Lisa, always a pleasure to have you on live stream. And Michelle, you are on our radar now, so you will be contacted and we will bring you back.
Yes, welcome to the community, Michelle.
Once you're in, this is like the mafia. So
it's true.
Well, I'm really glad to be here, so that's awesome. And thanks, Bart.
Yeah,
you did a great
job. Thanks, Bart. You're just always the best. I'm so, one community organizer to another. I'm so impressed with what you've done. It's incredible, and I love working with you. And I can't wait to see you next week.
Yes. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.